All right, let's get into it. My name is Brandon Johnson. You're listening to This is Baseball. So, last week, I guess, was not paying attention, but the last episode I released was my 50th episode of This is Baseball. I hadn't really checked for any upcoming milestones, so completely missed it. So we're just going to celebrate the 51st episode of This is Baseball. So if you're new here, thank you for checking the show out. I hope you stick around. If you've been here for a while, thank you for continuing to come back and listen. I think 51 episodes is absolutely incredible. I appreciate everybody that has stopped in and listened to this show and continues to listen to this show and has listened to me just try to figure this thing out. Sometimes I still am not quite sure where we're going or what we're doing, but I enjoy doing this every week, and I'm happy and excited. Like 51 or 50 episodes, 51 episodes, whatever, like it's a big deal. And really, we've been doing this just over a year, and I feel like we're really just getting started. So again, like 51 episodes, wild. Thank you everybody that has listened. We've had a lot of new listeners and growth really over the last 3 or 4 months. And I feel really good about where the show is headed. So with all that being said, like, here's to 51. Let's get into it. So last week, the state of Kansas, the government of Kansas, long story short, they basically have the green light to try to lure the Kansas City Chiefs and Kansas City Royals from Missouri to Kansas. And at this point, like, the Chiefs moving to Kansas almost feels inevitable that that's going to happen. Obviously, we don't know and won't know for a while. And we've seen renderings of what a new Chiefs stadium would look like over, I think, near the Legends. Like, it'd be a dome. It looked pretty sweet. And I think that that's the way that the Chiefs are going to go. I've had a lot of trouble envisioning what a Royals stadium on the Kansas side would look like where it would be and kind of what that would look like. So over the week, an architecture firm released some concepts of what a Royals stadium could look like on the Kansas side. Now, I want to be clear. I want to preface this. Like, I'm going to go over these renderings, this plan, this concept, this vision didn't come from the state of Kansas, and it didn't come from the Royals. Neither have confirmed that this is something that they are doing. And this is really just to kind of give you a vision of what a Kansas baseball stadium could look like. So this is from KSHB.com. KSHB is a local news station outlet that covers Kansas City. So the headline is a Kansas City Royals stadium where home runs can be hit out of one state and into another. So a local architecture firm, Manica, released these renderings, and they released renderings of a stadium that is located near the West Bottoms and near the Kansas River. It literally sits on the state line. And looking at the rendering, something that I noticed is, number one, the ballpark district is on the Missouri side, and the ballpark itself is on the Kansas side. So I don't really know how that would work. But something else that stuck out was I see a parking lot. And a big sticking point with the Royals downtown plan and the Crossroads was parking. Where are we going to park? Because obviously Kauffman Stadium right now, just a massive parking lot. Parking is not an issue because it's not surrounded by anything. These renderings show parking. Now it's limited parking, but there's parking that's in this. So looking at the actual baseball field, the field dimensions are exactly the same as Kauffman Stadiums are, which I guess is cool, but I would honestly, and I think it's inevitable that that's what's going to happen, just because every rendering I've seen looks like they're going to kind of keep the Kauffman Stadium dimensions. But I would like to see them do something kind of cool and change it up a little bit with the outfield dimensions. But something that this rendering has that previous renderings we saw in the East Village and North Kansas City and Crossroads is this has a variation of crown vision. Now, obviously, if you're going to put a stadium downtown, you don't need a massive scoreboard like the Royals have now. Because I think while crown vision is awesome, I think a lot of the purpose of that scoreboard is to cover up the fact that the backdrop is a highway. There's nothing behind the stadium, so I think that that's what they want you to look at. So in this rendering, they have the crown vision in left field, and it's not even remotely as big as the one that sits in Kauffman Stadium now, because this stadium actually faces downtown in these renderings. So you'd have a nice kind of skyline backdrop, so you wouldn't want to have a massive scoreboard blocking that, because you'd want to see that in the view. And obviously this rendering has fountains as well, because I don't think you can have a Royal Stadium without fountains. But even if these renderings are just to kind of create a vision, and they're not, like, Kansas hasn't said this is their renderings and the Royals haven't presented these either. But I think, like I said earlier, I've had a little bit of trouble envisioning what a Kansas stadium would look like, and this paints a pretty good picture of what it could potentially look like, even if this isn't what ends up happening. Like, again, like I've said multiple times, we don't know where the Royals are going to go. They could, for all we know, stay in Missouri, but I think this is a realistic option for the Royals, because this is still that kind of downtown stadium that I think John Sherman wants. So I think if they were going to go to Kansas, I think it would have to look something like this. I don't know if John Sherman necessarily wants to go to, say, the Legends, where the Chiefs would go. I don't think that they want that. I think that they want the downtown stadium feel. So, as always with the Royals' future location, I'll kind of follow that as more stuff comes out. But I just thought that article and that concept was just kind of fun, of like, here's what this could potentially look like. Now, again, like, that was just a concept. There's nothing official about that. But again, that was from KSHB. I'm sure talks will ramp up about the stadium location now that some stuff has happened over in Kansas, because I think now Missouri needs to answer. And if and when they do, we will cover that here. So, moving on. Over the weekend, Mets closer Edwin Diaz got ejected from the game for having sticky stuff on his hands prior to the bottom of the ninth inning against the Cubs. And he got ejected, like I said, and that is an automatic 10-game suspension when a pitcher gets ejected for having sticky stuff on their hands. So, obviously, if you watch baseball, like, it's very routine that the umpires check pitchers for foreign substances on their gloves, hands, hat, belt, whatever. They're looking for anything that's a little out of the ordinary that could potentially help the pitcher have some sort of an advantage with their grip that is typically for increased spin rate on the ball. A few years ago, they really ramped up enforcement of checking pitchers because of the use of spider tack and pine tar and other grip enhancers that were being utilized by pitchers across the league in order to increase spin rate. So, and like I said earlier, if you get caught, it is an automatic 10-game suspension. You can appeal it. I saw a screenshot of Edwin Diaz's hand, and it is caked in something. Now, a lot of people think that it's just rosin and sweat, which I don't believe is against the rules because obviously you can't control your sweat, and they literally provide the pitchers a rosin bag that sits behind the mound during the game. So I don't think that is against the rules, but he definitely had something on his hand, and he got ejected for it. He didn't appeal the suspension, so he's currently serving that. He's eligible to come back on July 6th. The Mets ended up winning that game anyway, and all is well, I suppose. So I was curious about the amount of pitchers that have been ejected for the sticky substance check. And there have only been 8 pitchers that have actually been ejected for this since they implemented this check, which I think that is a really good number considering every pitcher gets checked multiple times per game. Starters are getting checked all the time. Basically, every time that in between every inning, a pitcher is getting checked, whether they're coming in from the bullpen or they're leaving the mound, they're always getting inspected. So I think overall they've done a good job policing it, and there hasn't been really many people get dinged for it. I think the most notable pitcher was Max Scherzer last year. He got a 10-game suspension for potential sticky substance on his hand. He didn't appeal that either. I actually thought that he would. I was surprised he didn't, but just served a suspension and called it a day. But yeah, only 8 pitchers have been suspended for it since 2021. So a nice low number. And when you consider that the average number of pitches used per team per game is like 4.5, so about 9 pitchers per game total in over a 162 game season. I think 8 pitchers getting suspended for violating that rule is really good. So before we get out of here, I want to do a quick standings check. I think it's been a few weeks since we've done that, but let's start in the American League. AL Central, Cleveland is 51-26. They're 8.5 games ahead of the Minnesota Twins. So Cleveland is just really, really good. The Yankees leading the AL East. They are 52-29. They're only 2 games up on Baltimore. So AL East, I know that it's technically, I think today is technically the halfway point of the season. I think every team at this point has played 81 games or close to it. Yeah, there's a few teams that are still short of that 81 game mark, but halfway through, yeah, the AL East between New York and Baltimore is going to be really interesting down the stretch. We'll probably pay a lot of attention to that once we get past the All-Star break. AL West, Seattle is leading that division. They're 8 games over 500. They're 45-37. They are 4.5 games over Houston. We've kind of talked about Houston a little bit. They did not get off to a great start this year, but they are now just 1 game under 500. They're 39-40, and it's really, do you believe in Seattle to be able to hold on to this thing? Because I think Houston is inevitable. I will not be shocked if Houston finds himself in the postseason in October. And one thing we know about Houston is that they will figure out a way to be in the American League Championship Series. But let's hop over to the National League. So, National League East, the Phillies are 52-27. They're 7.5 games up on the Atlanta Braves. Again, Philly just having a really good year. Great year. They have the best record in the National League. In the NL Central, Milwaukee is 5.5 games up on St. Louis. They're 47-33. St. Louis is 3 games over 500 now. St. Louis has been playing really good baseball over their last 10-12 series. So that is a division that I think will get very interesting too. I would love to see St. Louis find its way back to the top of that division. In the NL West, the Los Angeles Dodgers obviously are in first place. They're 50-31. They're 9 games up on San Diego. San Diego's 1 game over 500. It's a division that is honestly disappointing. I think I wanted to see the Giants do well. They're 5 games under 500. San Diego is just, they're average. They have a lot of star power, but they're just an average team. Let's take a look at the wild card standing. So we'll start with the American League at now remember, there are 3 wild card spots. Now this is the 3rd year of that format. Baltimore has the first wild card spot. They're 6.5 games up in that race. Minnesota has the 2nd spot. Boston has the 3rd spot. Boston's been playing great baseball lately. The Royals are half a game out of the wild card standings currently. They have been in quite the skid. We've talked a lot about their bullpen, how it's not great. And unfortunately, right now, their offense has just gone to sleep. Their offense has basically been non-existent. They went 25 innings without scoring a run recently. I think it might have been 22. But either way, they went on just a drought. They won on Monday over Miami. They ended up losing last night to Miami. Seth Lugo, another great outing, 6 shutout innings, quality start, 8 Ks. Have some woes with the bullpen, and they end up losing 2-1. And yeah, the bullpen immediately gave up 2 runs, but the offense needs to score some runs. They lost 2-1. So that's the Royals. And then the Rays are 3 back. The Rays are 40-40. They're 3 back. And then speaking of Houston, they're 3.5 back. Like I said, they're 39-40, and they're in it. And jumping over to the National League wild card, top spot is Atlanta. 2nd spot is St. Louis. 3rd spot, I know I just dogged on San Diego, but they are in the 3rd spot. The Mets are right there as well. They're 1 game back. But I think something that's interesting with the new playoff format is you have a team let's just stick with the Mets. You have a team like the Mets. They're 38-39 right now. They're 1 game out of a playoff spot. They're under 500. And typically, okay, you would see them as probably sellers at the trade deadline. And that might still be the case. Obviously, we're about a month out from then, but you're 1 game out, and you could potentially make one right move, whether it's going and getting a starting pitcher or a bullpen player, or you're getting that piece in your offense that you're missing, and you add that player, and all of a sudden everything starts to click, and you find yourself in a playoff run. And you're down the stretch, you're trying to get that last wild card spot, and you have a legitimate chance at doing it. So the new format makes this interesting, because I feel like now, typically in June, we had a pretty good idea of who buyers and sellers are. And now I think it's literally, unless you're just the Marlins or the White Sox, it might be the last week of July before we really know who's a buyer and who's a seller. So I think that makes it more fun, because it keeps teams more invested. I know some teams think that the addition of more playoff spots kind of waters down the playoffs because teams think that they maybe don't need to field as good of a team if they can go 80 or win 83 games and sneak into the playoffs. But I just think it's a good way to keep every fan base in it because, like I said, the Royals right now they're 43-38, and this is it's the end of June, and Royals are still above 500, playing fun baseball for the first time in basically a decade. They're half a game out of a wild card spot, so and that could change in 2 days. In 2 days from now, the Royals could be in a wild card spot. Now they have a tough series coming up against Cleveland, starting on Thursday. They have a 4-game series, and that's a big series. It could be, I don't want to say a season defining series because the gap between the Royals and Guardians at this point, like I said, it's 10 games. So it's not as, even if the Royals sweep the Guardians, okay, the Guardians are still 6 games ahead of the Royals, but that puts the Royals most likely in a wild card spot and maybe even propels them up to that second wild card spot. But they've got to get their bullpen figured out, and they've got to figure it out offensively. And the thing about the offense is that's something that just happens. You're going to go through woes as an offense. You're going to have highs and lows, and right now they're in a low. So they got to work through that, and I think that they will. But the bullpen is the thing that I'm very concerned about because they're having just great starting pitching outings be ruined by poor bullpen performance. So I think whether it's the Royals feeling like they have an arm in AAA that they can bring up and try out. I know that they have Chris Bubich, who is rehabbing right now, that could potentially be an arm that they use in the bullpen. But I feel like a month from now, or maybe even a little less than a month from now, I think that they actually need to make the move pretty quickly because the bullpen, like I said, it's a lot of the problem. It's been a problem all season. You don't want to be out of it. You don't want to wait till next month and be out of it because you didn't make the move. So I hope that they make it sooner rather than later. I would like to see them potentially try to figure something out before the All-Star break as far as getting an arm in there that can be serviceable and reliable and help get this bullpen back in the right direction. Now, I already spoke about the Royals and Guardians series that's coming up. There's a couple other series that I want to pinpoint. There's not anything that's must-see TV, inside of divisions or something outside of Royals Guardians. I think that is the biggest series of the season, or of the weekend, rather. But I think the Mets and Astros meet this weekend. I think that's interesting because they're both teams that are kind of on the cusp of being in a playoff spot. And I think, you want to go into the weekend and come out of the weekend and be in a better position. And you have the Astros 3.5 back in the wild card. And then, like I said, the Mets that are 1 back in the wild card. And you want to see if you can if you're the Mets, get one of those wild card spots. If you're the Astros, you could potentially be half a game out when you head into Monday. Mariners and Twins meet. Mariners obviously leading their division. Twins are a wild card team, so 2 teams that if the season ended today, they'd be playoff teams. But there's nothing that's you got to watch that outside of Royals Guardians. So I think if you're what should I watch this weekend or what series should I pay attention to, I think it's Royals Guardians. That is all I have this week. Thank you for tuning in to the 51st episode of This is Baseball. I will catch you next week.